disaster is horrible, but it's of course it's something that the planet has been experiencing for a very long time, isn't it?
It is. It's also something Tokyo has experienced before on a number of occasions. In a sense, the people were waiting for this, and there was an earthquake in 1703 in Tokyo that killed about 150,000 people, and then there was another one in 1923 that killed a similar number. And Tim was talking there, I think, about trying to get about 200,000 people have thought to have been driven from their homes in this earthquake. Well, in the 1923 one, about 1.9 million people were made homeless. And after that earthquake, there was quite a big debate, actually, about whether Tokyo should not be rebuilt at Tokyo, but should be rebuilt somewhere else because the earthquake was so strong. But in the end, Tokyo was rebuilt, and pretty much in the same way that it had existed before.
So that puts it into perspective with other things that have happened in that part of the world. What about the wider picture?
Well, this earthquake, of course, happened on the so-called Ring of Fire, which is the ring that goes right round the rim of the Pacific. So all the way from the bottom of South America to New Zealand. And about something like 90% of the world's earthquakes happen in that region. And that region saw what was probably the most deadly earthquake of all time, which was one that happened in Shanxi in China in 1556. And that killed a staggering 830,000 people, many of whom lived in kind of holes in the ground. It was a pretty poor area, and they had a lot of soft cliffs, and people tended to gouge dwellings out of the soft cliffs, and you can imagine what happened to them when they were struck by an earthquake.
So we've always had things like this. Of course, that there are those who say we've screwed up the planet, and that's why we seem to be having so many of them now. Do you subscribe fully or partially to that theory?
Well, I think if you look at things like global warming, you can see there that there may well be an effect in terms of floods and more unpredictable weather. I'm not sure anybody's made a convincing case that earthquakes have been affected by what we've done to the planet. One theory, of course, is that they're to do with the moon. The moon is apparently a great deal closer to the Earth at the moment than it often is. And some people say that the gravitational pull of the moon is having an effect. But I think the jury is very much still out on that.
Can we expect any more? We've just had New Zealand, of course. Hot on the heels of that, we get Japan. Are we going through a run of these at the moment?
Well, there have been lots of earthquakes, but there always have been. I mean, if you look, for example, last year we had the dreadful Haiti earthquake at the beginning of last year, and then about 6 weeks later we had one in Chile. Now, I think an important thing to focus on here is that this is a big earthquake. You've mentioned that. It's I think that they say the 5th biggest to happen in the last 100 years. But of course, it's not always the size of the earthquake that matters. The Chile earthquake was much, much greater than the Haiti earthquake. But the Haiti earthquake killed about 250,000 people, whereas the Chilean earthquake killed, I think, something like 20 or less. So a lot of it is to do with where the earthquake strikes. And unfortunately, the Haiti earthquake struck very close to Port-au-Prince, which was a big city of about 2 million people, many of whom lived in pretty flimsy dwellings. And so that was the reason it was so devastating.
John, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. All very interesting and useful stuff. That's John Withington, who is a disaster historian. And if you are worried at all about anybody who might be caught